and Jimmy, because does that not sum up the message of Jesus and his earthly ministry? Was the power and goodness of God, infinite, great, tremendous, and for our benefit. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten, that idea of perfect life, individualized. He gave it to the world that it might express through each living soul. Well, here we are. We began with our daily word reminding us that Easter, this celebration, the intention, what it's all about, is to draw us into a realization of new life. Our Gospels, meaning the good news that Jesus brought to the world and was recorded by disciples and others through the years, each records the morning of resurrection, the morning of beholding the risen Christ in a slightly different way. I kind of like the minimalism of the Gospel of Mark, for we're told that Mary Magdalene and the other Mary and Salome went to the tomb and they looked in. They were prepared to anoint the body of Jesus, as was their custom. But they looked in and the tomb was empty. They were awestruck and they fled in fear, not knowing what had happened. The Gospels of Luke and of Matthew emphasize the fact that, again, the women came first to the tomb, and they found angels, messengers of God there at the tomb, asking them, "Why are you looking for the living among the dead? For he has risen, and he will meet you as he prophesied at the Sea of Galilee." And then perhaps the most intimate and tender story is recorded in John's Gospel, where Mary Magdalene also finds the tomb empty and a heavenly messenger pointing to the grave clothes neatly folded and set aside. Mary is perplexed. She wanted to anoint with spices and do honor to the body of her teacher, Jesus. But the body was not there. She cried out, "Where have they taken my beloved?" And she encounters what she thought was the gardener. And tears flowing down, the gardener says, "Miriam, Miriam." And that voice calls to her mind, and she exclaimed, "Rabboni, teacher." She realized this living man was her teacher who had been crucified and buried in the tomb. She ran, of course, with enthusiasm to grab him and hug him, as we would here at Unity. But he said, "Wait, touch me not," or in some translations, "do not hold on to me. I have yet to ascend to the Father." So these gospel accounts give us different dramatic portrayals of the resurrection. The body simply vanished, or as Mary encountered the risen one in her very presence, right before us. And she ran to tell all the male disciples that Jesus was risen. Interesting historical note that what we call in the scriptures an apostle is one who has seen the risen Christ. And so women can be pleased that the first apostle in our scriptures is a woman, is Mary Magdalene, for she beheld the resurrection before the others. We have been traveling together through this season of Lent, preparing ourselves, preparing our mind and our heart and our spirit to be able to grasp the idea of a life eternal, life everlasting. And now we have arrived. We have the opportunity this Easter to behold life anew. Richard Rohr, familiar to many of us, Father Richard Rohr, notes something very interesting in a little detail in the writings of Paul. Paul, of course, laid down for the Christian tradition much or many of the concepts of Christianity as it has come down to us. And Richard Rohr points out in one line something that makes all the difference. In a letter Paul wrote to the early community at Corinth, he said, "If there is no resurrection from death, Christ himself cannot have been raised." Let me speak that again. If there is no resurrection from death, Christ himself cannot have been raised. In other words, an acknowledgement that life is eternal. It does not end. This is affirmed in many ways, but one is in the Catholic funeral liturgy, which begins, "Life is not ended, it is merely changed." Richard Rohr goes on to put it very simply. Nothing truly good that is of God can die. Nothing truly good of God can die. Now, our question of faith, what is ours to do, if you will, is to consistently, steadfastly, with conviction, hold to this essential idea. Christ in Jesus raised the dead body of Jesus that all might understand this eternal nature of the God life within us all. Yes, it may change form, but it never ends. Jesus gave what Unity called the ultimate demonstration of raising the dead physical body to new life. In my office, I have a beautiful inscription, an autograph by Myrtle Fillmore, the mother of Unity, dated in 1918. It reads in her own handwriting, "To know God aright is life eternal." To know God aright is life eternal. To grasp this essential truth that God is the eternal source of all, we, as God's creations, therefore must have our Creator's quality of eternality in our spiritual makeup. Wow. Myrtle's husband, Charles Fillmore, believed that this was the stupendous invitation, not only on Easter Sundays, but always. To recognize what is true, what is good, what is your essence, may change during your lifetime. At some point, we will all set our physical bodies aside. But there is something everlasting. There is something of a resurrection that we can celebrate. Now, in the Greek language, from which much of our New Testament comes in the language of Greek, anastasis means to resurrect. Literally translated, it means to stand up again. To stand up again. And by the way, little bit of trivia, my family name Stacey comes from anastasis, from that Greek word, meaning to stand up again, to resurrect. So you would think I could remember this rather well. My own name is telling me a constant renewal, a constant resurrection. But I struggle also with hope. We all at times lose hope. Some of us struggling with our nation and our world at this time. Where is peace? Where is prosperity? Where is goodwill among people? I'm losing hope in the human family. I've put my hope into a tomb. But I'll get personal for a moment, if you don't mind. At my age, and as a bachelor, I at sometimes become doubtful that I will ever find a loving partner. At times I've sung to myself, well, more than once, that poignant Gershwin tune, "They're writing songs of love, but not for me. A lucky stars above, but not for me." And in my wiser moments, I realize I have entombed my hope in that area of my life. And so I ask you this morning, have you entombed, placed in a dark and hopeless place, any dream, any relationship, your sense of joy in life, your peace, your trust in God as good and with you, your finances, your general health? I believe we all at times enter that tomb. We feel hopeless. But the Easter thought is to remember the Christ power that lifted Jesus from the tomb, and it can lift us from whatever our tomb may be and allow us to stand up again. Allow us to resurrect our joy, our hope, our dream, to resurrect that conviction in the all possibility of God. Because God is our spiritual creator, our source of all that we have, all that we will ever have, comes forth from the goodness of God. Now, I know some examples of anastasis, that is, to stand up again, to resurrect. It may not always be as dramatic as Jesus coming forth from the tomb in the Garden of Gethsemane. There are examples of resurrection in our lives, here among friends, in our own church community. So I'll give an example. I know of one individual, she said I could use her name, Patricia, who in her retirement years did not want to lose her creativity, to create beauty, her artistic skill. So what does she do? Each April, usually the month of resurrection, she stands up, goes forth, and goes off to art camp in Wisconsin to spend some concentrated time on sharpening those creative skills. She didn't resurrect her body from the grave, but she stood up, went forward, and said, I will do something that uplifts the creativity that God gave me. A friend of mine, hoping to ride his bike to victory, longed for his youthful and healthy self who used to ride mountain bikes. He was bemoaning the fact that by the end of last year, he had increased to 208 pounds. And so he set this goal: I want to ride this race in Colorado, up those great mountains and for great distances. And so he resurrected. He stood up and took action. He just reported me to the other day that he was now down to 167 pounds and preparing to go on that race, biking every day to increase his stamina. You see, he regained his dream, regained his hope by what? Doing something. Anastasis, to stand up again, to take action. Others of us are standing up and making positive, life-affirming changes for our health. Well, we face something discouraging. I just had results from my annual physical Friday, and it wasn't a good Friday. I was disappointed in the results. I could have been discouraged, but instead, I said, how do I resurrect from this experience? How do I stand up again and walk in my path toward greater health? I'll make changes. I'll stick to them. It is possible. Rudolf Steiner exclaimed, but what would this Easter thought of life eternal be if it could not become living in us, or as we would say in unity, become a practical practice for us to reclaim, to resurrect, to stand again to our hope, our dreams, our physical well-being, our prosperity, our relationships of all kinds. Do you hear me? When we hear the words of how great thou art, our heart swells with emotion. Why? Because the inner intelligence within us knows all things are possible in God, and we are God's children. But we have to stand up again, go forward, take action in our life. And that's what I am calling you to this day. As we enter now a time of meditation and following it with a flower ritual, which I will explain in a few moments. So I invite you to join with me in the silence, to turn within and to call forth your highest self, your true self, and see its connection to God, your Creator. There is power to resurrect anything in your life if, as one of our early Unity ministers said, if you want to, enough. So let us turn our attention within, taking a breath or two to relax and put your body at ease. Father, Mother God, I acknowledge that you are always and everywhere present. That means here now. Help me to resurrect my hope, my joy, my truth. So as we begin this process of raising up, I invite you to be honest with yourself, to allow yourself look upon any aspect of your life, any limitation you've placed on yourself, any thought of, I'm not good enough, I'm not young enough, I'm not smart enough, I don't have what it takes. Any circumstance, any relationship, any opportunity that you've given up on in your life is an inner tomb that you have built. Spirit is with you, so you are safe to call up any such doubt or limitation. And we call it up in mind so that we can speak the truth, the power of the risen Christ to that which is before our mind's eye. Allow the image to form in your mind. And realize this is not the eternal truth. Life, good, divine possibilities, that is the truth. Now silently speak to whatever image is before you. The power of the risen Christ, the very presence of God. Of all powerful, good. I now declare to this situation, I say, stand up again. Be reborn, be raised. For the God of all is present in all situations, so that means present in what is before my mind. Now we realize The question comes back to us. Am I willing to stand one more time? Am I willing to lift up this situation, this relationship, this possibility, my career, my dream? Am I willing? If I'm willing, then I will take an action. I will live as if I understand the possibility before me. My action may be a simple gesture. It may be a wholesale transformation of my life. All that matters is that I stand up and I try. Anastasis, to stand again, to resurrect, to take what I had buried in a tomb of despair and to see it alive, powerful, expressing good again. This is the truth Jesus wished us to understand. Life changes, but it never ends. Your dreams change, your relationships change, your opportunities change, but they are always resurrected. They always live again. And as you're ready, I invite you to allow your attention to return to this outer sanctuary where you're seated among friends. Friends who have this same Easter thought of life renewed within you. As you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes. In a moment, in our flower ceremony, we're going to make a simple gesture, but it stands as a model of how you may approach life in the coming days, months, years. How you can resurrect a hope, a dream. So I'm going to invite you in a few moments to literally, expressing that resurrecting power, to stand up again, to come forward. And in this ceremony, I have named From Tomb to Bloom. I invite you to do this very consciously. If you want the benefit, you have to really pay attention to this image that you're creating. I'm calling you forth to this rocky tomb here to remind you, what in your life have you entombed? Have you given up on? Hold that image and then come forward. You can take a flower, something beautiful and living from the usher, and come up, knowing in your heart, I am not lost to this tomb. My dream, my hope, my vision, my relationship, my career, any and all may be raised to new life. And place your flower here, and without lingering too long, just kind of snapshot, like with a camera, for your mind, this tomb of doubt, but you have brought an Easter flower of life to cancel out that loss of hope and to raise your sights again. So, starting with any row, you don't have to be formal about this. Come forward, receive your flower, create an image and capture it with your mind. We have all this area. The gardener. Just good. Some of you, I can tell, have been studying Feng Shui, the art of placement. Meaningful, beautiful arrangement. I have one. You've transformed a symbol of doubt, hopelessness, things lost, even dead, with beauty, with your gesture, with your willingness. Keep this image in your mind, and when you become aware that you've lost hope in anything, you've given up, think of the beauty, the possibility. This is the resurrection thought. This is the Easter thought. Life changes, but it never ends. Hold on to that truth. Keep your hope alive no matter how many times you must resurrect it. So at this time, our ushers are coming forward. I invite you to consider your offering another gesture of beauty because you're making it to keep this ministry and our community alive. So I invite you to join in our offertory statement. Today we're saying it all at once, first and second statements. Together, God gives abundantly. I receive thankfully and give again generously. This is the bounty of God. We send it forth with wisdom and joy. And as the ushers collect the offering, I'm going to ask you to walk and chew gum. I'm going to ask you to sing our closing song, The Day of Resurrection, and pass the basket. And we'll ask T. Michael to now add his special seal to our ceremony.
You better give me permission to put a seal on something. I like that. Put my seal on it. Well, here's something that I know that the Holy Tabernacle Choir of Unity South can handle. But we're going to practice it because we want to make sure that you all excel, because that's what we do. We know that perfection lives in the breath that we spoke of earlier. And in this song, written by a brother named Evan Hawkins, I know it back in the late 60s probably. I know when I was in high school, we sang it. Back in, I'm not going to tell you what the year it was. All I can say, it was in the early 70s. Anyway, and y'all might know this one. If you know it,